Okay.
Sure. I wanted to introduce my friend, Deb Rodriguez. She's the former chief people officer of what is now Beauty Health, but formerly HydraFacial. That's how I got to know her, was when her partner in crime, Clint Carnell, had brought me in. I met Deb first. I think it's the Strand in Manhattan Beach. There's some restaurant, and I did my party trick of a super of one is a super of nine. And then Doc Watson was like, how did you know I have a generator and I have too much life insurance? I was like, well, and then so I was able to fool Deb into thinking that I actually had something useful to say. And, but Deb, you meet a lot of executives along the way when you got a little bit of gray hair like I do. And I think Clint calls her not just a chief people officer, but a strengths trainer. And I think that's the best kind of iteration and form of that role, is that Deb has the eagle eye to see what people's strengths are. Yes, there's a role. What are the responsibilities? How do you pay them? All that kind of good stuff that has to be done. But she can see what people's superpowers are, how much more they can get out of them, and then just trying to help them see the truth about, like, hey, you are not good at these things. What are we going to do about it? Are we going to hire around you? Are we going to, get them better or whatnot? So like the best way that I can describe Deb is not just her skill set and the knowledge that she has, of which those are immense, but the outcomes that she's driven when, HydraFacial is just one of many, many things that she's done. And she'll talk some about that. But like, HydraFacial was a sub $40 million business. I think when Clint took over, Deb was Clint's first hire. I think back in 2017-ish, around that time. Yep. And between the two of them, they quintupled the business. And not only did they take it public via SPAC in 2021, one of the top 5 most successful SPACs in that time frame, they had a little bit of a speed bump called COVID, where Deb and Clint had scaled the company dramatically. Had a deal that they were on the 11th hour of signing that would have, done great. And then this was March of 2020. And then I believe, I'm going to get some of the numbers wrong, but Deb and Clint had to lay off 90% of the company because the deal fell through because of COVID. Mm-hmm. And then, the last time I talked about this, Deb swore at me because she was like, I can't believe you're making me go through this again. So we won't go through that a lot. But, they rebuilt the company, from negative revenue to, growing it just far quicker than anyone thought. One of Deb's, key people had a spreadsheet that said that when we hit this revenue, we can bring these people back. And they went out and did that, and they rebuilt the company. And so they took a company to the moon. It crashed hard, like in everything in COVID, and they, like a phoenix, rose up again and just really took it to the next level. And I have all the world of admiration for Deb. I've learned a lot from her, which is why I thought it might be great to have her speculate what the future of the chief people officer role might look like in a world of AI and agents. And so there's any number of cool things that Deb has taught me along the way: the 555 job description, predictive index, the 7-box, and all the hard conversations that she's had along the way. And I kind of want to go through, Deb, your toolkit that you have built over the years. Starting there, because like the problem that I think you solve uniquely better than anyone that I've met in your role is, I think you've said hiring is kind of a coin flip. Call it a 50-50 chance that you get it right. And that's not really acceptable in business. You would not feel good about that if that was, your CFO, like, oh yeah, I think this capital allocation decision is a 50-50 chance of working. But there are different tools and techniques that she has that takes the odds from 50 to 60 to 70, if not higher than that. And if you are an aspiring chief people officer, track person, or frankly, if you're, the next entrepreneur, you got to know that you need a partner like that to get you to where you want to go. But also you want kind of what Deb is speculating what the future will look like in a world of all these best practices and the skill sets, but also in a world of AI and agents. And so thank you for doing this, Deb. Did I miss anything from the introduction?
You didn't, but I have to tell you once again, I did not need to live through that trauma of what happened at HydraFacial pre-SPAC.
You're going to swear at me again?
Yes, exactly. I feel you could see the look on my face, like, oh God, I don't want to live this again. So yeah, but thank you for that. And at the end of the day, really a great success story and a story of resilience and super talented people coming together to make something happen. But for sure, I don't think you
Amen.
really missed much of anything.
Cool. Well, let's get into it. So I sent you some high level structures of the article and maybe new book series that we're working on, the Agentic Executive, and we kind of lead with this kind of couple of core ideas of, a riff on Peter Drucker's The Effective Executive and kind of how people have lost their way about outcomes. And that what's very, very obvious now is things are moving very quickly in the age of AI. There's a PwC report in 25 that said that, there's a 56% wage premium for workers that are demonstrating AI skills versus other peers in that same role. And so as I think about, the Jessica Solomons of the world, the Megans of the world that you've hired over the years, like what are some of the kind of best practices and the tools that you have? Like I think about the 555 job description as an example. Like, can you explain what that is? And like,
Sure.
and we're going to play agent or not agent, like agent or human is basically the game that we have. And the hypothesis being things that are bespoke versus, rote and, repeated over and over again, things that are low stakes versus high stakes, things that are, have a lot of numbers and quantitative data to work with versus more subjectivity. Like we believe the things that are, low stakes, rote, and have a lot of numbers are easily in the agent camp, but you'll tell us what the right answer is. So, but I thought I'd start with the 555 and then we can go from there.
So before we jump into the 555, if you wouldn't mind me just taking
Please.
a minute or two to sort of set some context and how I've been thinking about all of this, because I am, as I've told you before, super excited about what AI is going to be able to do, especially this, I don't know, I call it agentification for lack of a better word. I mean, taking it from AI, from just answering questions and doing workflow, but getting us to a place where this agent can actually reason the same way as I would as a person. And I think that's really where the magic is going to come in. And I'm fearful that HR is going to miss this opportunity because they have a little bit of an identity crisis every time we try to do something like this. So I always say to people, I wish I could clone myself. I talk to leaders all the time about how do you create mini me's inside of your organization so that everybody who's working for you has the same reaction and runs through the same logic and decision making every time a problem comes up, because nothing is black and white. Everything has some level of nuance to it. I mean, even when you're talking to employees about things like how do you effectively use your benefits plan, it really is super dependent on what is the medical issue or what is the problem that you're dealing with in that moment. And what computers or automation has never been able to do for us before is actually say, what are all the coaching questions? Can it actually take the nuances and the details and actually reason through it before it starts taking action? And that's the part that I'm excited about when we start to think about agentic HR. So to kind of jump back to now to your question about, is this an agent or is this an HR person? I'm going to tell you right now, I think a whole lot of it is agent. If we can get it to reason and to think like the human being does and actually become a clone of you. And
Yeah.
I was listening to a woman the other day by the name of Alicia Little, I think her name is, and she was a marketing person, but she was talking about how she's created an AI clone of herself that can actually go out and do client presentations and literally take Q&A from the audience and answer exactly the same way she would. And that it's hard for people to tell whether it's her or whether it's her clone
Wow.
doing this. And so that's why I get really, really excited about that. So let's jump into 555.
Well,
And then,
can I just?
Deb, I was going to say, I have a
Go ahead,
question
go
too.
ahead. Yeah.
My one thing that stood out to me that you said when you're talking about how you see this happening and like how you see HR, you're afraid that HR is going to miss the opportunity. You said they always go through an identity crisis
yes.
when things like this happen. What do you mean by that, and why is that the case?
Yeah. So So I'm going to use a non-automation, non-AI, non-technology kind of example because we've all been through some version of this. Years ago, Adobe came up with this new annual performance review process, and they called it the check-in. Some of you will remember that from some of the articles that were being written. And a lot of us in HR got pretty excited about it and tried to implement it in the organizations that we were in. And essentially what it did, it took that traditional performance review that we do once a year. It literally takes us 6 or 7 months to get through the entire process. It's a formal written review, and it has a rating, typically a 1 through 5 rating, right? And what HR does is it manages this entire process starting in October, November, where it has employees doing self-assessments that get passed on to a manager who takes that input along with all the other stuff they've been tracking through the year to create a performance review. That takes them 2 months to write. Then it runs through HR so that the HR person can coach and guide and make sure nothing got missed, but also make sure things are set in a way that's meaningful and useful for the employees down the line. Then we go into calibration sessions because we have to worry about hard graders versus easy graders and how do we make it even. Then we force everybody in the organization to get everybody on this 5-point bell curve so that the majority of the people are a 3 in the organization. Then we chase managers down to actually deliver the performance review and employees to sign it. And then on top of all of this, the performance review gets delivered. All the employees that are rated a 3 are mad. And so then we spend a month or two just listening to employee complaints and mediating discussions with bosses on whether their ratings are right or not. Right? Literally 6 to 7 months. What the check-in said is we need one discussion for maybe an hour every single quarter. No paperwork requirement and no rating system. Beautiful. Real time, development focused. We have 4 things we talk about, right? The goals that you had last quarter and whether or not you achieved them, feedback for you, both positive and constructive, feedback for the manager on how they can help in the past or going forward, and then a development discussion. Super simple, no paperwork, no rating, none of that strife at the end of the day. The biggest resistors in every organization I was in was actually the HR business partners themselves.
Of course.
What are we going to do with our time? This is where our value is in the organization. If we don't do this, then what will we be doing with our time? And it's not so much about job loss at the end of the day. It's much more about, I literally don't know what to do with my time. I don't know how to add value. Because what I've noticed over the years is HR is probably the least as a collective. So I'm stereotyping. There's a lot of really amazing HR leaders out there and a lot of them in my circle that I adore and admire and I've learned so much from. But for the most part, the HR profession has not been asked to focus on outcomes.
I think that's huge
because it's task-based. So, right. So we actually don't know what to do. We haven't trained it. And look, I'm not going to put all of that at the feet of HR either. Quite frankly, CEOs don't know how to hold HR accountable for outcomes. They don't understand it either at the end of the day. So that's really what my biggest fear is we've got to help them understand how this multiplies them, what kind of value they can drive in an organization if they're not spent doing all of these tasks.
Well, I think the outcomes part is so important because I think what you're framing up is that, there's kind of above the agent AI stuff, there's the lack of outcomes as a problem, or outcome orientation, let's call it that, both in the HR function, but, at the CEO level as well. There's a whole lot of CEOs that don't focus on that. And what's kind of fascinating for me, listening to the way that you were describing the whole performance eval process, like coming out of thing, we did that twice a year, not once a year, right? And in part because I think the outcomes and the performance eval were so much more tightly linked in an up or out environment, right? Like you needed the performance eval to figure out, is this person getting promoted or are we firing, basically counseling them out? Because it's kind of a pyramid scheme is not the right word, but like it is very much like we have a whole crew of people coming in that are cheaper and are hungrier and whatever else. And if you can't perform at the next level, then we don't need you here, type of a thing. And so like I do think that when the people are themselves the outcomes, so to speak, like you're trying to grow senior partners is really what you're doing, then it's not ideal still, but it's very clear, like no, we're not screwing around here. It's promote or fire is basically the outcomes that you're trying to get to. And I think that's probably not so much the case in a lot of HR environments. I would suspect that at HydraFacial, it was a very different animal, just because it was not a mature category. You guys were creating a new category. And, actually, I don't know if you want to tell a little bit more about the business context, because like, you were PE owned. Obviously, they're looking for a financial outcome of the business, but you had you and Clint, two crazy cowboys, along with everybody else out there trying to do something really magical in the space. I think that was really notable. But I do think that the HR function is very different when you're quintupling the company in the same amount of years than if you're just kind of steady as she goes, right?
I'm not so sure.
Say more about that.
What does every company want? They want revenue and profitability. Right? It doesn't matter who your constituents are. Employees want that because that means better working conditions for them, better wages for them, job security, all that kind of stuff. What do shareholders want? Revenue and profitability. Yeah. I mean, I don't mean to oversimplify it, but I don't think it matters. I mean, I've done check-in in an organization that's very mature and slow growing or zero growth, but I've also done it in organizations like startups and turnarounds and that sort of thing. So I actually don't think it really makes that much difference. And as a matter of fact, something like a check-in helps the leader get to a place of, is this person right or not right, a lot faster.
Yes. But there's no doubt that a check-in would be valuable in whatever the context is. And I think the interesting part about the check-in, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that it's an exponential in terms of time saving, right? It's just so much faster with that, which I think is in part the AI and the agents it's either a massive cost saving and or a massive time saving. Remains to be seen how quickly does it get to better outcomes and decisions from that standpoint. Because we did write about how Sergey Brin at Google, when he's back at Google now, and he was kind of surprised at, all of his meetings with his direct reports are on Zoom or transcribed. And he put that into the Gemini LLM and was like, help me find, a diamond in the rough that I'm not seeing. And it identified this person's not talking a lot, but what they say is immensely valuable vis-a-vis the minutes that they're actually. So he was kind of blown away at how it helped him manage his team. But like, I'm kind of curious of like the three kind of major outcomes, like time saving, money saving, or better leaders. Like, do you have one of those three that you would lean towards that you're most excited about in an agentic HR function or a different outcome?
Yeah, no, it's not the time savings. I think that if we approach this from this is going to save me, the individual, or me, my department, time, then we're coming at it from the wrong angle. Like the agentic HR should, like I said, it should be a multiplier. All the great stuff, all the great frameworks, it's how do you disseminate that across the organization? How do you make it available in real time when you need it? Going back to that super simple example of the employee sitting in the emergency room with a child with a burst appendix. It's 10 p.m. at night. They can't reach out to HR to figure out what their benefits are going to cover and what they're not going to cover. But if they have a clone agent of me that they can reach out to, or that agent can give them the reassurance they need to know, like this, nobody's going to bill you today. Let your kid have the surgery. Like they're going to submit it to the insurance company. The company's going to watch out for you. We're going to take care of you. Here's how the plan works, kind of thing. Those are the types of things that it actually improves your culture. It builds trust with you and your employees. But when you get into things like looking at, we're going to talk about the 555 and we're going to talk about PI, but even the rating scale that we use, the 7-box grid, which is what replaces the annual performance review rating. It's a whole different process that's subset onto the check-in. Those kinds of things make leaders better. They improve trust with employees, which is going to drive the kind of culture that you're looking for, and is also going to make everybody more productive down the line.
Yeah.
And if you're more productive, you're happier too, right? I mean, there's
Yeah.
the correlation. So I think that's this is where I think often functions make a mistake, and HR is no exception. Like, what have we done with the annual performance review? We've automated and put it online. Who did that save time for? It's
Yeah.
made every leader's job more miserable, every employee's job more miserable. They all
Right.
hate it at the end of the day, but it's way easier for HR right now. That's the
So
mistake.
time saving is the red herring. It's to your point. It may lead to actually inferior outcomes. And when you say multiplier, let's get specific. Like,
Yeah.
I understand that in a benefit context. So I think, and we'll keep a running list of agents. So a benefits agent would be great because no one can read and understand that stuff. And so just somebody that's an agent that was like, can you explain to me in plain English, can I do this or can I do that type of a thing? 24/7. So that's a clear win. And, certainly if I think about the outcomes, Deb, it's like, if people probably realize the full extent of the benefits that they were being offered, maybe retention is higher as a result of that. Like they don't appreciate fully what they have there. But multiplier, like, tell me what that means, and like from an outcome perspective.
So what specifically looking at HR, I have an infinite loop problem. The number of times I have had the same conversation or some variation of that conversation over and hundreds, thousands of times in organizations, whether it's the times an HR business partner has walked into my office and said, can you teach me everything you know about how you design compensation or how you think about compensation for the organization, or why are our plans designed the way they are? And I sit down and try to cram not only in 2 hours my philosophy, but also bring in all the concepts around compensation that have taken me years to learn. I mean, I don't have enough digits to count the number of times this has happened. But then there's always follow-up questions. Well, what about this and what about that? And in every organization I'm in, the compensation it's not a universal compensation structure. What I'm going to do for a startup organization or a turnaround is completely different from what I'm doing for a steady state kind of business. And look in how we're going to consider putting that thing together. So it's all the questions that I ask in order to understand what behaviors are we trying to drive, what outcomes are we looking for in order to design that plan. The other thing is, to your point, when we start talking about things like predictive index and other behavioral or motivational assessments in kind of development for employees or in hiring practices, things like that. Every time we have that conversation with a manager, it's just slightly different. Yep. So I can have an agent who explains it to you, but what's going to be really exciting is when I have an agent who can actually look at this particular candidate, compare it to the job, and walk you through a series of questions that help you decide whether or not it's a match at the end of the day. Because many of these things we try to make black and white, which aren't. So.
Yes. Okay, so that's super helpful because like I'm writing down a running list of benefits agent. That one seems fairly
easy,
straightforward. Yes, because the benefits plan is always the same.
Yeah.
Yes, you have people with different circumstances, but and the hypothesis is that companies spend a lot of money on these things, and people probably aren't fully realizing all the benefits they could be getting, and maybe retention's higher. Recommend to a friend, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. The second one, and I'm hearing this structured around the most common, like if I had $1 for every time I had the conversation, like there's a Mount Rushmore of those things, and it sounds like compensation is one of them.
Yeah.
Right. And then I've heard two things. One is other HR people coming to you like, how do I design this? Mm-hmm. Maybe even leaders of like, how do I design? Like, I think about the most recent venture that you were helping Clint and I with around like, hey, we had a whole starter sales force, and what does a founding incentive look like, and how do we design it, that type of thing, right? So and that one is a little more bespoke, it sounds like, because as you said, not every situation is different. Life cycle of the organization matters, and yada yada with it, and so. That one, so and in my mind, Deb, like that takes me to either one of a couple things is that it's not one compensation agent, but many compensation. Like maybe I don't know if there's a salary comp agent, there's a bonus, whatever.
Sure.
With it. Yeah. Or there is a startup company's compensation versus a, whatever it might be, a large mature company. Like, help me unpack, like, what level of detail are we talking about on the compensation front?
So what,
as well as what outcome are we trying to drive to as well?
Yeah, and I agree. There might be multiple agents. I don't know enough about that, but here's what I worry about more than anything is oversimplifying things, because not every startup is going to need the same kind of compensation plan, but we do need to ask the same questions. So it's almost like a decision tree, right?
Okay.
Of what are you trying to drive? So I'll give you an example. And HydraFacial is great, since you've already introduced this one. This was an organization where the top sales rep in 2016, the top person sold $300,000. Okay, that means everybody else was selling less. The average was probably somewhere around 150,000. What was this device? It was maybe a $20,000 system, right? So that gives you a feel for how much they were selling. When we came into the organization, we said, if we put the right marketing, the right support system around this, then we should be able to have reps easily selling $500,000. So let's build around, that's the goal. That's the target that we're trying to get at. Nobody believed that they could do any of this. But I'll just fast forward with that. We could probably spend hours just on this discussion alone. But not only did we have in 2017 somebody hit $500,000, but before the end of the year we had people on track to do $700,000. And then here's kind of the lesson learned and the messaging that a comp system or a comp agent can actually help you with embedding in the organization is when that person went to 750, because we had built this comp plan with this huge hockey stick. Like the more you sell, the higher your commission is. And not only that, but we'll take it all the way back down to $1. Now, all of a sudden, you had a board of directors and private equity firms going, well, no sales rep should make that kind of money. And we had to have this pause in the conversation to go, what? Like, what? Why are you focusing on what that individual is making? This is how much revenue they're driving. This is how much of a multiplier that's been. By the time we got to 2018, most of these reps were like the top 50% were on track to do $1 million. Like it was and that was what, sure, there was a whole lot of other stuff we did around culture and better benefits plans and just being a better place to work and all of those kinds of things. But really, if I'm honest, the real multiplier here was the compensation plan.
I love this so much, Deb, because what I think I'm hearing you say is that within HR, there are certain, so benefits is in one bucket. That's kind of like, maybe on the margin, if you had like a truly legendary benefits package, maybe you attract different talent or whatever, but like it's not like you can have a benefits package that's tied to your sales rep performance. Like that doesn't make any sense. The sales compensation side, that's a wholly different thing, because that sales is so tightly wound to outcomes, which is great. And what I'm hearing an agent cloned in the version of Deb for sales compensation, what I would hear the agent say is, don't benchmark. That's monkey see, monkey do. Tell me where you are, productivity per rep. So you're at 300 grand per, where do you want to get to? Right. Oh, $500,000. Okay. Now let's design. That's the from to. Given that, how do we design a compensation plan that achieves that there? Exactly. And then also, maybe you're wrong about 500K, and how do you make it so that on the ultimate extreme, you don't get, unnecessarily bad outcomes or unintentional outcomes with it. And so like you want exactly what you're describing, where the P&L is in sync with the sales compensation plan. Nobody complains about that. Right. Unless you're like kind of a certain kind of board member that's like, what's going on here? That's a different thing. That's a different topic. Okay. So, but I really like that of like, compensation is not the end. It's the means to a business outcome. Let's talk about the business outcome and therefore, so like, I think there's kind of like outcomes based HR decisions and this and that, and kind of like, I don't know. I don't want to say benefits aren't an outcome, but like it's a different category of thing that, that's probably in the more road. And I think kind of, well, I actually like your definition of multiply, because I'm hearing you say I can multiply business outcomes. That's a sales compensation one. I can multiply my HR leaders. I'm in more than one place at the same time, because the employee at the ER can talk to me at midnight and I don't have to be on the phone with them. And that's a real benefit as well there.
Yeah.
I have a question.
It's broad reaching. Yeah.
I have a question to close the loop, maybe on the compensation agent. You mentioned that every company needs a different compensation structure, but the questions are the same. So if you're thinking about building an agent and trying to train it for these questions, right? When we've built agents, or as we are building agents currently, a lot of it is like list out all the questions that need to be answered and then answer them for our specific organization and have us like, that's how we're training the agent, right? It's always these set of questions. So do you have any off the top of your head that would for sure need to go into a compensation agent?
Yeah, I think there's going to be questions around sort of understanding where the company is. But I mean, Eddie's pretty much given them to us, right? Let's start with, what are you trying to achieve? We start with the outcomes. I'm a huge fan of Willie Peterson's model, his strategic learning process, which is start with what is your desired state versus what is your current state, and then what are all the gaps, and then how do you fill those gaps using, I don't know, I think he has something like the 5 Ps. There's people, process, pay, right? Whatever those things are. So that's where you want to start with everything, right? Is kind of moving through that process and asking those questions. And I'm a little caught off guard. I have to think a little bit more about compensation questions in particular. But when we get into things like the 555 and the PI, I can be a little bit clearer, because I've given them a lot more thought to those, about how the agent would actually work and what follow-up questions they'd ask, and then what reason or extrapolation should they get from that.
Well, actually, so before we get into all of that, like I do think, Kat, you're raising the right question about the questions and I think, Deb, the Willie Peterson stuff is great, because I hadn't thought about it until you just described it, but you could create an outcomes agent for the HR executive. Like, before you start anything, are you certain what business outcomes you're actually driving towards? Well, what does that mean? And sometimes you get lucky. You have, a Clint and a Doc and everybody else, and the outcomes are pretty clear that you're trying to drive towards. But I would say that most companies don't like it. They're either like, I want to go from this market share to that market share, or I want to drive revenue from X to Y, which is like, okay, but like, how are you going to do that? And why do you have a right? Like, there's a whole set of outcomes, which you're exactly right. Like, you could build, Willie Peterson should build it, but like you could build one of like, where are you today? What's your current state? What's your future state? Exactly. So what are the gaps, right? And therefore, what's the plan, as you said, the people, culture, process, structure, measurement, awards, and then what's the action plan that you like? So you have to kind of do that as kind of an a priori, like before you get into benefits, comp, you have to know, as well as the CEO does, what are the outcomes? How are you going to get there? Your strengths, weaknesses, all of that stuff. Like in ideally, you would have done it together, or it's spelled out for you. And if it's not, then you're kind of in a weird spot. But you bet, even if the board hasn't done it, the CEO hasn't done it, you better know what business outcome you are driving towards, because at a minimum, it'll make sense what you're doing at that point. So I think an outcomes agent could be very powerful. And Deb, like I was thinking, Kat, like we have a lightning strike agent that we built out, and there's like a pre-flight checklist of like, have you done these things? Yes. Right? Do you know what financial target you have? Do you know what strategic target do you have? Do you know who your super consumer is? Do you know, are you a B2C or a B2B2C model? Like, there's all sorts of just fundamental strategy questions that have to be understood. And I have a lot of empathy for a person parachuting into a chief people officer role, because I don't know, I would say it's less than a 50-50 chance. It's really well spelled out for you.
Mm-hmm. No, 100% agree. I mean, when I think about a comp agent, the comp agent's not working with the CEO and board. The comp agent's working with the HR partner to make them more effective. Because one of the things that I've learned as an HR professional is if I show up at meetings and just ask good questions that make other people come up with this, like force other people to come up with the solutions or the answers, they think I'm brilliant. So, and that's one of the things I always try to teach my HR partners is like, you don't have to have the answer. You don't have to design the comp plan. You just have to ask really, really good questions that help them narrow down what they're looking. Let that be a business decision for the head of sales on how he or she's going to compensate the organization. But you asking all the right questions helps them get there. It's coaching is what it is. It's becoming a performance coach for the organization.
Okay, now, so this is now really, really interesting. So I'm going through. Okay, day one, I'm the new chief people officer. What am I going to do? Like, I don't know who my people are. My team is. I'm going to talk through let's design an outcomes agent by Deb, by whomever, and then it's like, okay, where is the business today? Where does it want to be tomorrow? How are we going to get there? Right. That's kind of strategy in a very simple nutshell. Now, you said strength trainer. Like that's the interesting part to me. Is like, okay. I'm the chief people officer. Let me look at my immediate team. What strengths do I have? Yeah. Where are the weaknesses? And, where do I need to go first? And exactly as you said, like, I don't really know how you think about it. Like, I know you were Clint's first executive hire, so that kind of made you hand in glove in a very special way. But as you said, a sales comp agent, you need to be super tight with the head of sales. And hopefully they have their act together and they know exactly what they're trying to do. And, you talk in the doc of like, hey, it's 300. Can it be 500? Is that too high, too low? And him having to weigh in on that and stuff. And so like, how do you navigate that of like an outcomes agent I could see going first? And then what would you do next? And your second priority as the chief people officer, if you were to parachute into a new organization?
Well, look, my advice to everybody, any HR person at any level of the organization, as soon as you walk in, is learn the business. And the way you learn the business is by developing a relationship with everybody that you're going to support. So for me as the chief people officer, it's the executive team and the CEO, and understanding everything they do. Weasel your way into every meeting they have. Tell them, I just am here to learn. I'm going to keep quiet. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to disrupt your meeting. And also, part of the reason why I do that is because I want people to get used to seeing HR sitting around the table, and that it doesn't turn into, HR's here. We got to be careful what we're saying. That ridiculousness that goes on in organizations, which is one thing that makes my blood boil, is anytime I walk into a meeting like that and I hear that, it just makes me so angry. So I want those, so twofold, right? One, I want to learn the business, but number two, I also want to see how I can help the organization. And number three, I want to remove that stigma of HR showing up. I want everybody in the organization to see this function as performance and strength coaching, and they're to literally help versus get in the way of things, right? I coach my teams to like, keep your mouth shut about anything you think might be legal, ethical, or moral. Just keep your mouth shut in the meeting. Like, you want to, let's have a discussion about it afterwards, try to understand it, but don't walk in and make your very first impression on everybody going, oh, you can't say that. Or that, because you want people to be able to trust you. And look, we have conversations all the time where somebody says something maybe inappropriate or could be offensive. And yeah, you're going to want to warn them, let's not say that in a broader audience. What are you trying to express? Can I help you express that in a way that is makes more sense and wouldn't be offensive to people? That's great. But at the end of the day, it's like, people make mistakes, and they need to see HR as somebody who can help and coach them and will give them a little bit of grace and is not ready to pounce on them because my only value is protecting the company from risk, right? Yeah. That's, as a side note, I'd say, one of the things that we have kind of, HR has been agentifying, I guess, if you want to call it that, is this whole annual performance review, right? They literally have AI in there reading the performance review that you're writing as a leader and then flagging things, right? And right now it's not very good. I mean, it's flagging stuff like, well, you used he and you should be using they, like you're not using the right pronouns, right? Or it's saying the manager may have said, oh, I need you to be able to discriminate between what's medically necessary and what would be a nice to have. And then the AI flags and goes, you shouldn't use the word discriminate because it could be it's like, it doesn't have context for how it's using the word in that. Or the manager might say, your work is kind of sloppy. I'm missing a lot of the key details. And then the AI flags and goes, well, the word sloppy might be too slangy or it's an offensive word to people. And I'm like, give me a break, man. Like this is not helping anybody. And this is the worst of HR. This is the stuff everybody hates HR for, is this kind of ridiculousness. But that's what I'm seeing right now. Like all this compliance stuff that we're trying to put AI around, that we're trying to make everything black and white. First off, nothing's black and white. But second off, they're AIing or agentifying things that people actually people don't like about HR.
Yeah. If you hear screaming, that's Christopher, shouting, yes, Deb, and probably some cuss words about how much he agrees with you about all of that. But like, it's super interesting, Deb. I mean, it's like, I know you know what he says and sounds like and the like, but like, we have a saying from a marketing perspective, marketing that doesn't drive revenue is called arts and crafts, right? And HR, I'll start with this, right? So keep your mouth shut. Learn the business. How can I help remove the stigma? And best way to do that is HR that doesn't drive revenue is whatever the equivalent is just kind of like you're playing business, not actually adding, business with it. And like when I think about that, like when learning the business, how can I help? First question that I would say is, what is a revenue agent from an HR perspective? Like, how can I drive revenue in a way? And that, because if you're not driving revenue, then you're either going to be adding value from a cost perspective, which maybe you don't want to do that part of it, or you're not adding value at all. And so like when I get to that, I think about like, well, sales compensation, clear way to, like a clear place to jump in so that, there's probably stuff to upgrade to add value. And I think a sales comp agent is a much clearer set of outcomes that you can drive with that. And then the next part is like, how can I help? Which of my peers around the senior leadership table needs a talent upgrade? If you added the next level of talent into marketing, you would drive revenue. If you added the next level of talent into operations, you drive, productivity efficiencies, and all of that's going to be revenue and forward and revenue enhancing and the like. And so like, does that kind of work of marketing that doesn't drive revenue, arts and crafts, HR that doesn't drive revenue is, whatever the equivalent is.
Yeah. And I'd have to think about that a little bit more to figure out what it is, but I think you're onto something. I think we can have a soundbite for that. But if you think about what should HR be doing, it's helping everybody. It's helping the organization be more productive, bring in more money. And all of this ties back to, I'd say a good chunk of it ties back to leadership. So what HR people should be doing and the way they add value is to make your leaders better than what they are today. Because the better your leader is, the more they retain the great talent and the more output they get from people.
Yeah.
So that's really what we should be doing. The second thing they should be doing is really working with the CEO in creating and then driving the culture that you want for the organization and how things get done. And then thirdly, it's attracting that talent and making the right hiring decisions to bring the right people into the organization. And of course, and all of this is sort of wrapped up in also a little bit of being the voice of the employee, or a lot of it being the voice of the employee, I guess I should say, being that feedback loop from the employee population back into leadership so that everybody understands what's happening and what are the effect of the actions and the policies and the things that we're doing. And HR, like finance, we also have, and legal, we have a, avoidance of risk kind of thing. But that's like table stakes for getting in the door. That shouldn't be your identity. Your identity should be about culture and building great leaders and all these things that drive performance, however you define performance for your organization.
I love it. And I think it's what I'm hearing you say, not only is the risk avoidance is, that's table stakes. That's, you're supposed to do that and don't make it your all in all, but like driving productivity, like I'm hearing, so let's say new head of HR, let's do the outcomes agent. Let me learn the business. What outcomes can I drive? All that kind of good stuff with it. Right. Now the next agent and this is totally different than I thought we were going to go in, which is awesome, Deb. So like now I can see a productivity agent. How can I make the current organization more productive? Is it on the sales side? Is it on the marketing side? Is it on the finance side? Like where is the missed opportunity from a revenue perspective or a cost savings perspective? Like, how can we help the organization make more money, period, end of story? And then I hear a leadership agent. How can I, because I remember I had a guy, this guy, Bob Yamas, who was the Dave Calhoun's head of HR for Nielsen. They're all both ex-GE guys and went to Blackstone and whatnot. But he would say, every leader has two jobs: produce more leaders, produce EBITDA. That's it. And so like, how do you have a leadership agent? Like how do I kind of get a sense for who my leaders are? How can I make them stronger? There's probably a whole set of, tools around that of that you can do that. And then and then I get to a culture agent. Like, how do I enhance the culture? Work with the CEO to make it, their own and a reflection of what they want, and then talent, and then the feedback loop. Like I can see it's a wholly different suite of agents than I thought about it, but like an outcome and a productivity agent through the lens of HR, hugely important. And it's really thought provoking for what that might actually look like. But I could see a young, it's basically the what Clint calls you as a strength trainer is what you're effectively doing.
Yes, a strength coach. Yeah. Well, and you're making me think now. So we're going to have to talk again in another month because my brain is going to go off because I wasn't even thinking about these performance coaching agents or strength coaching agents. What I was thinking of is if I can get an agent to a hiring agent, right, that works people through a 555, a behavioral assessment, interview questions, that kind of stuff to pick the right talent for the organization. Think about how many times I've had those conversations, going back to my earlier point. If that was all on demand in the moment and literally somebody could be coached through that, that frees me up to go in and sit down with the head of marketing and go, okay, what's keeping, because this is my next question when I go into an organization is, what's keeping you awake at night? Not people stuff, anything in the business that's keeping you awake at night. Because I'm going to tell you right now, 99% of the time, it ties back to people in some way. Somebody's either doing something, not doing something, something is not working, and it's all people have got to do this. So if I have these agents working on the side, doing all this repetitive coaching work for me, it's reasoning for me, it's actually able to take the nuance of a discussion and looking at somebody's PI and saying, well, yeah, this person might work better than this person for your culture based on what you've told me, kind of thing. I'm not having that conversation. But what I'm doing is I'm sitting with the marketing team and some customers, and I'm actually facilitating the problem-solving discussion. I'm not coming up with a solution. I'm not out there looking for problems. Every business leader knows what their problem is. What they need is a really, really good facilitator. And HR people are well-trained to be great facilitators. And because we're interested in everybody's success, we want the organization to be successful, not one department over another. We're very non-biased in this way. We have no stake in the game. So it's all facilitation and coaching, and then that it's putting structure around the problem solving. It's, years ago, you guys remember when Six Sigma was really big? I thought one of the biggest mistakes HR made back then is HR didn't take that underneath them. And lead all of the Six Sigma meetings and facilitation 100%. And process improvement, because who's better equipped to do that? But it's the same kind of thing right now. That's where I add value in the organization, is helping the operations leader. When I say, what's keeping you awake at night? And he says to me, God, he goes, we've got a 40% defect rate on this product. He goes, 40% of all our products need to be reworked. Yeah. And I said, this is when I was at Johnson & Johnson, and I said, if I could solve that problem for you, how much would that be worth to you? And he said,
love it. Love it.
This will save me infinite amount of money, stress, all that kind of stuff. I said, great, let me in your business. Let me follow the process. Let me sit on the production line and figure out what's going on. And look, in a nutshell, just like every quality defect problem, there's 1 or 2 breakdown points every single time. Me, the outsider, the HR person, was able to figure out what those 2 breaking points were and where the extra quality check needed to go in. And it was, at the end of the day, I thought, this is the simplest thing in the world that I've ever done, problem I've ever solved. But it's kind of, it's funny how you can't see it when you're in the middle of it. But that's how HR can add value and drive outcomes for the organization.
Yeah.
If we're not caught up in this routine bullshit that we do every day.
100%. It's so you're exactly right. We have to do this again, because there's another level of detail that we need to dig into. But like, so an outcomes agent, we absolutely need that. You need a productivity agent, and in the productivity and outcomes one, like as I think about kind of how, you, Clint, and I have worked in the past, like you're kind of vanilla SWOT analysis that everybody does. Yeah. Probably having a SWOT analysis agent by function makes a lot of sense, right? Like if you had, hey, head of HR, come in, give this agent to your head of ops, your head of sales, your head of marketing, and say, just walk them through, what are the strengths of the organization? And then, oh, by the way, these are the HR tools that I can make your strengths even stronger, right? Yeah. What are the weaknesses? Oh, that's what's keeping you up at night. Okay, let me think about how can, is there an HR angle or a tool in my toolkit that I can use to help with that? Opportunities and threats. Like, you go through the same thing, and then you're kind of triaging at that point. You're not just kind of being like, hey, everyone's going to be following. This is you can't say these things in the business. None of that. But it's like, let me triage the business. Where can I have the biggest impact as quickly as possible? And then what are the things in my toolkit can make the biggest difference? And then you can apply okay. You have take the ops example. I have a 40% defect rate. Well, what's the issue? I don't really trust my people there. Okay, let me look at your job descriptions and let's 555 this bad boy and get this to work better, or whatever else it might be, right? Or it's the culture in my sales force is low, right? Because they feel like quota's too high or whatever else it is. Okay, well, let's see if we can change the comp plan, or we may have to replace the sales force and start it over again, or whatever it might be, right? But I think it's the identification of the outcomes and productivity mixed into one through the SWOT analysis. Like it just, everybody knows what that is. As you said, HR people are great facilitators. They probably aren't walking in like thinking, let's do the SWOT analysis, and then let me apply the HR tools to that. But it seems to make the most sense for how someone would add a lot of value very quickly. Yeah. With that.
Yeah, and look, it's sometimes it's not even about we need a better job description, we need whatever. It really literally is making people in that organization, like in the ops organization, stop for a minute, walk somebody else through the process for the light bulb to go on in their head to say, oh, that's where I'm running into a problem right now. It has nothing to do with comp. It has nothing to do with culture. It has nothing to do with job description. It's that this little wire, HR can solve technical problems. It's this little wire that when it gets to step 5 gets loose because we're working with such small components that somebody knocks it out of place. And then it goes on all the way through step 12 and it's been defective since step 7. So what are we going to do about that? If step 7 is where the wire is getting knocked off, we put a quality check in at step 8, so we don't go all the way to step 12. But that's the thing that I really want to understand. It's not, it involves people, of course, solving the problem, but it's not necessarily a quote unquote HR solution. If I want to clarify, and I'm not so sure I think the agents can teach HR people how to do that, but I'm
Yes.
not sure the agent is going to replace the HR person. Like I said,
100%.
it's going to free
Yeah.
the HR person up to do these kinds of more value added things to really add value for the organization. And look, I don't want to lose touch of where we started the conversation, because I think the stuff that's near term, because I think those agents were years out from that. But I'll tell you
Yes.
what's near term right now. Like a 555 job posting is near term right now. Like
Okay.
I can improve your hiring odds significantly just starting with your job posting.
Okay, this is great. So I'm going to summarize what we just went through, because that's I think the core thesis, if I sum it up, is that the true value of HR is not about HR. It's about identifying the right outcomes, finding the right humans to partner with, and directing the right resources to go to those humans. Like if you just deconstruct HR into its component parts, like it is not about benefits, comp plans, performance. It's not
Human
about the
resources.
Activity. Yes. Find the right opportunities, push them to the right and the right humans to unlock it, and give them the right resources, agents, and wisdom, and all the kind of along the way. So all that's, I think, an incredible framing for how the future function should think about. And by the way, it'll be like, I think about like, how the left tackle in football became like the highest play role because they protect the quarterback's blind side, right? I don't see why, if HR were able to do this properly, identify the right outcomes, find the right humans, direct the right resources to them, there's no reason why the HR professional wouldn't be the second highest paid person in the organization if we actually accomplish these things. And so let's lay that out as the size of prize for the function. And then, but now let's get to practical tactical. So please explain the 555, why it works, and how it can be agentified.
Okay, so here's what I'll just challenge everybody to. Go out on any job board, go to your own company's website, and look at the job postings there. If you have to scroll more than once on that job posting, your job posting is way too long, and I guarantee you it's a piece of crap. And it's not getting you the candidates you want. So what you end up with this list of something like 25 tasks and job duties that this person is going to have to do in this job, followed by a laundry list of, we really hope you bring these 25 things to the table, skills and requirements. And then you end up with two types of people. One person who reads the job description in full, takes it literally, and says, I don't meet all 10 of these requirements, so I'm not going to apply. When in reality, as a company, we would be super happy if we could find somebody with 6 of those 10. Right? Because who has them all? Nobody has them all at the end of the day. The second candidate that you get is the person who doesn't even bother to read because they've looked at so many of these ridiculously long tomes that they call job postings and says, it's a marketing director. I'm a marketing director. I'm just applying. So they don't even screen themselves out. So you're going through tons and tons of resumes of people that are unqualified, and you're missing out on qualified people all over the place. So I used to work for a CEO who felt that everybody's job could be condensed into 3 main outcomes, 3 things they were responsible for. I'll give you 5 at the end of the day. So what we do with the 555 is we say, first thing I want from you are the 5 most important things this job does. No more than 5. If it's 4, I'm happy too, but it can't be more than 5. You can condense everybody down to 5 things that are the most important, and forget that BS line of and other tasks as assigned, right? Like if people don't understand, if a customer service rep can't understand that if the head of customer services says, hey, can you go get a cup of coffee for this client who's sitting in my office so that I don't have to go leave the client all by themselves for a minute? If they don't understand that that's a reasonable request, then they just shouldn't work there anyway, right? Like you don't need to put that other duties as assigned kind of stuff inside of that. So let's put down and let's focus on outcomes versus tasks. Not sit here and process invoices all day, but use this system to process X number of invoices every day, right? So that's the first 5. The second 5 is, what are the 5 requirements for the job? And this is solely experience, education, and skills. Really hard, concrete stuff. X number of years doing this level of education, this type of degree, this kind of training and certification, this kind of skill level, right? Forget all the stuff like self-starter and dependable, because nobody ever read a job posting and said, oh, I'm not a self-starter, so I'm not going to apply. And again, you're going to get the 5 most important things or 4 most important things. It's like, if we find this person, we're going to bring them in, right? And then the last 5 is what you are going to love about this job. And this is not, so I see you nodding your head and you think you know, but you don't know. Because here's the thing, people go, oh, well, we have a great benefits plan and we're competitive comp and we have a pinball machine in the break room and we do all these fun parties and activities and we have lunch and learns. It's like, no, none of that stuff. That's not the stuff that sells the job. What you're looking for in this last 5 about what you're going to love, this is the truth telling stage. So when I'm in a startup and I'm hiring sales reps, their territories are going to be geographically massive, which means they're not sleeping in their beds every night. They're traveling, they're in hotels. So you're going to love this job if you're a road warrior and don't mind being away from home for multiple days at a time. Right away, I've screened out a whole bunch of sales reps who that is not going to fit into their lifestyle. Right? So think about what you're doing. It's like, hey, you love being in the office every day working with colleagues. All the introverts and all those people who said, I'm never going to go back to the office again, screen themselves out because they know we're not going to do this. I see Katrina Cat. I see you raising your hand, right? Or if I say, you know what, you love doing analysis and digging into the data, but what you love even more is getting out there and talking to people that are affected by the data to really understand the stories behind the data. That's different than an analyst who just sits behind spreadsheets every day. So it's those kinds of differentiations that end up screening. People will go, oh, no, I don't want to do that every day. I just want to sit with my spreadsheets. Versus the person who really loves to go out and investigate and do focus groups and do that kind of thing. So it's kind of this last 5 for me is kind of based on one man's trash is another man's treasure kind of thing. And people will say, oh, but this makes it sound really bad. And I'm like, yeah, but if you wrote a job description for me and said, give me the most messed up company, this place is a complete disaster. Nobody likes working here. Turnover is 70%. Our benefits plan is the worst in the industry. Like you send me that job posting, I'm applying all day long. You send me the one that says, hey, we've got all our systems and processes in place. Everything runs like on schedule. All you have to do is follow the rule book. I'm not interested. But there's 2 different, you want to make sure you're attracting the right kind of person. So the beautiful part about this, so as many times as I explain this to people, hiring managers love it. Oh, I love this. And then they sit down to do it. I've never had a single one come back and get it right the first time. I've always had to coach them through. I always had to say, why are we putting self-starter in here? Don't you have some other skill that you think is more important or some other experience you think is more important than letting them self-select out? Same thing on the why will you love that? That's a really hard thing. Really hard thing for them to come up with, right? So I always have to coach them through and I have to ask them more questions. I have to make suggestions. If I have an AI agent that can do this for me, because they know how I'm going to think about it and how I'm going to ask, it literally can help this hiring manager write that. Then all I have to do is spend 10 minutes with it. 10 minutes to look for what's off. And I'm like, oh, they missed that. So I spend 10 minutes fixing that, sharing it with the manager. Then I share it back with my AI agent so they don't make the same mistake again. 15 minutes versus something that's taken me 2 hours before just to write one job posting with a hiring manager in the past. But wait, it gets even better. Because then what my hiring manager can say is, wow, now that I know exactly what I need for this role, what interview questions can I ask?
It is so good, Deb. Because it's like we have a strategy therapy process that we're converting into an agent, but part of it is There's a whole roasting section where it makes fun of your strategy just to get you out of your comfort zone. But it's when you're saying something kind of like, as you said, self-start, like the equivalent of like, we want to delight our customers. Like, well, duh. Like, like you're trying to get people, to pay attention to and break through. It's such a good agent that could do this, and not only because there's real structure to it, but there's real wisdom that you can program into it so that you don't have to have the conversation over and over again with it. And so it's so powerful. And then, so like, I think one, thank you. Two, we need to do this again because there's more to cover with it. And then the third one that I'll kind of leave with before you have any other thoughts to add is that you tell me if this is kosher, Deb. I would say, as much as possible, if you are, Deb Rodriguez from 20 years ago or whatever, keep as many conversations that you have recorded on Zoom into a transcript, because the more of those that you have that you can upload into an AI, the more likely you can train a clone version of you to have that conversation so that you don't have to have it. And that, because the other thing that's really apparent, Deb, is that, like, yeah, you could build an outcome agent and a productivity a SWOT analysis agent, but like there's probably, I imagine a world where you had said if you were 20 years younger, like, what would you do? I imagine a world where you come into a new organization, even now, and you're like, hey, I need you to do me a favor, download this. And guess what? There's going to be AI Deb that you can talk to 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And, and here are the questions that you should ask it, and then do that. And then I'll come talk to you, and then we're going to rock and roll and just go really, really quickly with that. But like, that to me is like, the more I think of like Clint's user manual that he has, right? Of like, that he gives to all of the people that he works with. Like, there's an aspect of this of like the conversations that you have over and over again, get them down into a transcript. You can anonymize it so that you prevent, privacy issues or whatever else it is. But like, the more trainings that you do, record it. Presentations that you do, record it. Because then it'll be ripe for you to clone yourself and just have that much of an impact. But I mean, like, okay, so we'll do this again. There's so much more to cover, but like, I do think this idea of, the SWOT analysis agent to identify the outcomes, and then you kind of, very quickly driving to a revenue or a profit or a leader outcome as much as possible. And then, once you've done all of that, you're playing with house money, and then you'll have a much easier time fixing the basics with it. And so I just think it's such a powerful reframe of the function. And, I think the goal, as you said, we talked about, like, how do we make HR the second highest paid function in the company? This is how you do it.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I said, there are just so many things and so many tools that an agent can just, these repetitive conversations we have, you can just take those off the table and go, okay, now I can really go focus on helping the business be more successful. And to your point, all these other agents that you're talking about, like the SWOT agent and problem solving agent and facilitate, like, that's all training for the HR partner. So they can then go out and actually do those things and make a meaningful difference.
Well, okay. To be continued. Thank you so much, Deb. This is amazing. I don't know if, Kat, you have any other questions you want to ask, but like, I think we've,
yeah, my final question is just, oh, Eddie, I think we need to meet. Yeah, you're echoing. My final question would just be, you mentioned going back. If you were 20 years younger, you would go back and change the world. What would you say to people who are in that point in their career right now?
Yeah.
And kind of what's your advice for them looking forward and being in this role and thinking about this AI future?
Yeah, it's, I would actually quit my HR job. I would not have had the last 20 years as traditional HR. I would have become the AI expert for the human resources and organizational development and training and development teams, so that they'd be paying me big money to just consult and show them how to do it and pull that stuff out. Because what excites me about this AI, and look, and I'll back up. I joked with Eddie at one point, I feel like I have missed so many big trends. I can remember in the 80s when they were talking about personal computers and we got our first computer at work. I was one of those people who said, yeah, I don't think this is going to catch on. Okay, that's how not visionary. And I feel like for the first time in my life, I'm like, oh, I see the vision, like this could happen. So I would completely abort my entire career and start over, because I think there's way more money to be made and way more impact to have across so many more organizations just by helping individual functions use AI properly and not use it for some of this stuff that we're going after right now, like compliance and flagging language and APRs. And my all-time absolute worst right now, I don't even understand what's going on, is these AI agents interviewing candidates. What kind of employee or potential employee experience and trust are you building where you have a computer interviewing people? What a horrible use of an AI agent. I think it's awful at the end of the, so a really, really strong opinion for the day. But I mean, that's what I would be doing, is just like figuring out how to help them take this stuff and multiply themselves inside their organization, do things that build trust, that free them up to help the organization drive outcomes. That's what I'd be doing.
Well, it's not too late, Deb. So let's see what happens.
You could be the coach for the younger people who want to go do that. There you go.
There you go.
And if you want to hire Deb, we'll link her LinkedIn below. So
Great.
she can be a consultant for your company.
Yeah, happy to do that.
All right. Where can people find you, Deb? Is LinkedIn the best place to connect?
LinkedIn is a great place. You'll find me under Deborah Beckwith Rodriguez. And you can also send me an email at dbrcoach. So Deborah Beckwith Rodriguez Coach at gmail.com. And I'm happy to reply or help anybody out or help them find the resources they're looking for.
Thanks, Deb.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's great to have you on. And until next time.